no one at my level has been ignoring the situation here from the very beginning. I reached out to your CO through my chief of staff very, very early on in this crisis. On Sunday, I told him that I wanted to come out to the ship, and if it would be okay or if it would be too disruptive. I told him that because I wanted to be able to help if there was anything else he needed as this massive effort was underway to get you guys healthy and clean and safe. He waved me off. He said he felt like things were under control. He had been concerned a day or so before that things weren't moving quickly, but he still wanted to get more beds, but he didn't think it was necessary. He also talked to my chief of staff and emailed back and forth with him. On Sunday night, he sent that email. And that email went out to a broad audience of people. I know that I mentioned that it was over 20. We believe it was forwarded to even far more than that. And immediately it was picked up by the San Francisco Chronicle, which published sensitive information about the material condition of a naval warship. If he didn't think, it was my opinion, that if he didn't think that information was going to get out into the public in this information age that we live in, then he was A, too naive or too stupid to be the commanding officer of a ship like this. The alternate is that he did it on purpose. And that's a serious violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which you are all familiar with. And I can tell you one other thing. Because he did that, he put it in the public forum, and it's now become a big controversy in Washington, D.C. and across the country about a martyr CO who wasn't getting the help he needed and therefore had to go through the chain of command, a chain of command which includes the media. And I'm going to tell you something, all of you. There is never a situation where you should consider the media a part of your chain of command. You can jump the chain of command if you want and take the consequences. You can disobey the chain of command and take the consequences. But there is no situation where you go to the media, because the media has an agenda. And the agenda that they have depends on which side of the political aisle they sit. One of the things about his email that bothered me the most was saying that we're not at war. Well, we're not technically at war. But let me tell you something. The only reason we're dealing with this right now is because a big authoritarian regime called China was not forthcoming about what was happening with this virus. And they put the world at risk to protect themselves. Crew of the Teddy Roosevelt, you are under no obligation to love your leadership, only to respect it. You are under no obligation to like your job, only to do it. You are under no obligation to expect anything from your leaders other than that they will treat you fairly and put the mission of the ship first, because it is the mission of the ship that matters. You all know this, but in my view, your captain lost sight of this, and he compromised critical information about your status intentionally to draw greater attention to your situation.
This is Trump's acting Navy Secretary Thomas Modly smearing the former captain of the very ship he's standing on, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, to his own former crew. A crew, mind you, that gave him an ovation that went viral across social media when he was fired. Which made it all the more tone-deaf when Modly opted to use the ship-wide intercom system to attack that very man. By the way, keep in mind that Modly is only serving in this position because he was okay with Trump pardoning a war criminal, as opposed to the former Navy Secretary Richard Spencer. That's why Modly is there, just, in case you needed a character assessment. Now, to be clear, this all started because Captain Crozier's email to Navy leaders that detailed the failures of the Navy to provide resources to quickly move coronavirus-positive sailors off the ship was leaked to the San Francisco Chronicle. That led Trump's acting Navy Secretary Thomas Modly to announce that he'd lost confidence in Crozier, a sentiment that was echoed by Trump.
More importantly, he wrote a letter The letter was a 5-page letter from a captain, and the letter was all over the place. That's not appropriate. I don't think that's appropriate. And these are tough people. These are tough, strong people. I thought it looked terrible, to be honest with you. Now, they made their decision. I didn't make the decision. Secretary of Defense was involved, and a lot of people were involved. I thought it was terrible what he did. To write a letter? I mean, this isn't a class on literature. This is a captain of a massive ship.
Consider, too, that the Trump administration has blamed China since the beginning, and including during this leaked audio, because of Chinese leadership's denialism and punishment of whistleblowers. And yet Crozier was effectively fired because he pushed back against our own administration's denialism about the outbreak. He needed help making sure that his crew was safe. He wasn't getting that help, so he blew the whistle on Navy leaders dropping the ball, and he was punished for it. So Trump and the rest of his cabinet might be content to scapegoat China until they are blue in the face, but to be unequivocally clear, they are behaving in the exact same way. Moodley also repeats this talking point that we're currently at war, but we're not, unless you count an administration failing to prepare for a virus that we knew would eventually come here, but opted instead to pretend it doesn't exist as a, quote, war. The only reason this talking point persists is because the only way the Trump administration operates is if it's perceived as fighting someone or something. So whether it's immigrants or Democrats or China or a virus, the White House needs to promote this narrative of it being under siege, even if that's entirely of its own doing, because that takes the responsibility off of them and puts it onto the, quote, enemy. But rest assured, the response to this outbreak was their responsibility. They did have adequate time to prepare, and they chose to ignore it. So if we're at war, it's because Trump opted to aid our so-called enemy and leave us for dead. What's even more baffling is that Trump's decision to fire Captain Crozier was done because the administration felt embarrassed by a leaked letter. And yet that story didn't even get a fraction of the attention that this leaked audio is getting, wherein a Trump administration official took to the intercom and bashed a beloved captain in front of his entire crew and thought somehow that it wouldn't get out. Because if there is one thing this administration does well, it's try to put out fires by pouring gasoline onto them. But worst of all is that Captain Crozier was fired for too widely disseminating a letter that called for the immediate evacuation of sailors from the ship that was unsafe. And yet even now, the Navy has only met 67% of its own scheduled evacuation target, in that it said that 2,700 sailors would be sent ashore by Friday, and yet only 1,825 have actually been moved, according to CNN's Ryan Brown. In other words, the Navy literally validated the exact complaints from Captain Crozier that they weren't moving swiftly enough in the face of the outbreak. But all of this is just one more assault on a military that Trump has exploited and denigrated since before he even took office. This is the same military that Trump was caught siphoning money away from in order to fund his border wall, a move that was ultimately blocked by a federal judge. The same military Trump used to prop up his Turnberry resort in Scotland that was down $4.5 million in 2017 and miraculously up $3 million in 2018. The same military that Trump had put in harm's way by abandoning our allies, the Kurds in northern Syria. The same military Trump disrespected when he attacked a World War II veteran, John Dingell, claiming that he was in hell, or when he attacked Gold Star families or derided a prisoner of war for being a prisoner of war. Trump may use the military as a prop so he can pander to his base, but his actions have shown a lasting and deep-seated disdain for everything that our military is supposed to represent. Every day that Acting Navy Secretary Thomas Moodley remains in his post is a slap in the face to every service member serving this country. And even still, he pales in comparison to the shame brought forth by our Commander-in-Chief.